Good morning on both sides.
Morning.
This room is relatively broad, so when I speak to one, I cannot speak to everyone at the same time. So I say good morning first, and then good morning on this side as well. And good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Is there anything we need to raise before we start with the examination?
No, Madam
No?
President.
Not, Madam
Good,
President.
fine. Then can I ask you to switch on your microphone and then leave it on? That's fine. Good. For the record, can you confirm to us that you're Andrew Mangakala? Yes.
I am Andrew Mangakala, yes.
I apologize for the difficulty of pronouncing your name, but now I have it in my ear. You're the acting head of financial modeling at the Ministry of Finance,
Correct.
and you've held this position since January 2021.
Correct.
And before that, you were a senior internal auditor at the Mining Commission,
Correct.
and that is from 2018 to 2020.
Correct.
Can I ask you to keep your voice up, sir? Just speak loud.
Correct.
And before that, because that may be relevant also for your testimony, you were manager at the Tanzania Minerals Audit Agency for 8 years.
Correct.
Good. You've provided us with one witness statement that is dated the 20th of December 2021. Is that right?
Correct.
And you have your witness statements in the bundle that is in front of you. Is that right?
Correct.
Fine. You're heard as a witness. As a witness, you're under the duty to tell us the truth. Can I please ask you to read the witness declaration that is in front of you?
Okay. I solemnly declare upon my honor and conscience that my statement will be in accordance with my sincere belief.
Yes, that is the expert declaration. Maybe the correct one, because you have been presented as a witness, would be the witness declaration. No, the witness declaration states, and you can simply repeat after me, that you solemnly declare upon your honor and conscience that you will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Sorry, I can't remember all the words.
Can you solemnly declare?
I solemnly declare
That you will speak the truth,
that I'll speak the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So, good, we managed. Thank you. So now you may be asked some introductory questions by Respondents' Counsel, and then we turn to Claimants' Counsel.
Madam President, we don't have introductory questions.
Fine, then we'll turn directly to Claimants' Counsel. We've done it, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Mangakala.
Good morning, sir.
Good to see you again. Now, Mr. Mangakala, you have provided one witness statement in these proceedings, right?
Correct.
Yes, and it has been put forward as a witness statement rather than an expert report, right?
Correct.
Now, did you choose to describe it as a witness statement, or was it the respondent's legal team?
I'm not conversant with all the legalities about it, but as it reads, it's a witness statement.
Did you choose to call it a witness statement?
I was directed that I should write, I have to write a witness statement.
Okay. And is it described as a witness statement rather than an expert report because you are not independent from the respondent?
I'm not sure of what you mean by that question.
Okay, but you have been working for the government since 2003 in one way or another, is that correct?
Since 2009, to be
Since 2009.
exact. Before that, I was working for a contractor. Yeah.
Now, but you do provide opinions on technical valuation issues, right? Not facts.
I don't understand what you mean, but maybe you mean judgments or something?
Well, are you here to describe what happened in terms of facts, or are you here to give an opinion on economic issues?
I am here for the purpose, as indicated in my witness statement, to determine fair value for the purpose of compensation.
Okay.
I
And
don't know what that means in
Okay.
legal terms. Yeah.
and you were instructed also to review and respond to the expert report of Miss Vicky Wall, correct?
Correct.
Now, if I look at your CV, Appendix AMA to your report, your first diploma was in materials management, right?
Correct.
And you also have an advanced diploma in information processing technology, right?
Correct.
And I see that you have a master's in marketing management, right?
Correct.
So am I right that none of these degrees actually cover economic theory or valuation of businesses?
As they read, but if you could see the content, you would understand better than that. Yeah.
Okay, but you are happy to discuss with me today issues such as valuation of businesses, assets, companies, and other economic concepts.
Relevant to the subject, correct.
Yes. Now, let's turn to paragraph 10 on page 2 of your witness statement, and I'd like to clarify the instructions you have received to prepare your witness statement. Now, you say there that it is your role to quantify appropriate compensation. Now, when you say appropriate compensation, you mean appropriate to you or to the respondent, or what do you mean by appropriate?
I mean fair compensation.
Okay, so you mean that you're calculating the fair market value of the asset in question?
Determining fair compensation, you have to go through valuation, a number of valuation approaches, which will determine what you'll get an outcome that will be fair to the specific to the asset, and in this case, you could say the claimants.
Now, sorry for insisting here, but when you say fair, I want to clarify what you mean by fair. Do you mean fair in a colloquial sense? Do you mean fair in terms of a legal outcome? Or if I look at, the last sentence of your paragraph 10, are you here to quantify the fair market value of the project, which is an economic concept?
Correct.
What of the three?
My role is to quantify fair compensation, and in that process, there is you have to go through determining appropriate valuation method, and what will lead you to. We have three approaches in that, and that will lead to fair market value, which will ultimately, if you add on the other relevant adjustments like interest and others, will come up to a fair compensation.
Sure, we'll discuss this in detail. I just want to establish that you are essentially instructed to calculate the fair market value of the project. Is that correct?
To calculate fair compensation for them.
No, I mean, look at the last sentence. You say to opine on the appropriate valuation approach and methods, and to quantify the fair market value of Winshear's investment in the S&P Gold project. That's what you're doing, isn't it?
If you choose that part, it's, yes, I can read it, but if you start with the first sentence, you'll get what I mean by that.
Sure, you want to calculate an appropriate compensation, but in doing so, you calculate the fair market value of the S&P project, correct?
And adjustment, correct.
So you're saying you need to adjust the fair market value?
Correct.
Now, when calculating the fair market value of the S&P project, you're not valuing the retention licenses, right? You are valuing the S&P Gold project, correct?
Valuing the asset, to be
You're
exact.
valuing the asset.
The asset under dispute.
So, can we agree that the fair market value of an asset is the price that a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller in a hypothetical transaction which is at arm's length and without duress?
Correct.
Now, let's have a look at paragraph 64 of your witness statement. When you define the fair market value of an asset, you're relying on the IVS guidelines, correct?
Correct.
And you agree that the IVS guidelines are an authoritative resource to determine the fair market value?
Yeah, a useful tool to guide valuation.
Now, you also agree that we are trying to calculate the estimated value in a hypothetical transaction, because you would agree we don't have an actual transaction at the valuation date, right?
In this case, that was not the case, because we had a precedent transaction for not for an idea for a similar asset or similar company, but for the same company. Mm-hmm. And within a few weeks before the dispute arose, and the buyer was also a participant in the same industry for the same commodity, and of course in the same location. So it's a bit, it's a unique situation that we had an identical precedent transaction for the same company and in the same environment, same commodity, and the buyer was an industry participant. So this was a special situation.
So, Mr. Wangakala, I know that you're very keen to talk about the Shanta transaction, and I promise you I will get there. I will spend a lot of time with you on that. But can we agree at the moment that your valuation date is, what is it, 10th of January or 10th of July 2018?
at the time of preparing this report, I was directed that the evaluation date is 10th July. But based on but later it was changed to, because it's based on what happened with regards to the changes in the Mining Act and mining regulations. So, but then I realized after being informed that actually the new regulations came into force in January. So the 10th July and 10th January, or some date, will, based on what on the method that I applied, because it's attached to the share, to the Shanta gold share pricing.
I'm
it
just
will have the
asking
same
you what
effect.
the valuation date is that you're using.
Now is the 10th January.
Okay. So we have 10th of January, and you're aware that the claimant is using the 19th or 18th of December 2019 as a valuation date, right?
Correct.
Now, neither the 10th of January 2018 nor the 19th of December 2019 are the date of the purported Shanta transaction, correct?
I don't know what you are, because you are comparing two different reports. I don't know.
Well, do we agree that the Shanta transaction should have taken place in June 2017?
If you are talking about 19th June 2017,
Yes.
on that date, there was a press release confirming that Helio Resources and the Shanta Gold have signed an arrangement agreement in which 100% shares of Helio will be Helio Resources. Shanta will acquire all of the issued and outstanding common shares of Helio Resources.
Yes, and can
That's
we
what
agree?
happened.
Can we agree, sir, that the 19th of June 2017 is not the 10th of January 2018, neither is it the 10th of July 2018, and neither is it the 19th of December 2019?
Correct.
Now, what we are trying to do in assessing the fair market value is to estimate what a willing buyer would pay to a willing seller in an at arm's length transaction without US on the valuation date. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Now, while we are on the topic, let's look at paragraph 20 of your witness statement. Now, I'm not sure I agree with everything you say in that paragraph from a legal perspective, but you say there that any valuation method that is used to determine fair market value, and I quote, must lead to results that are reasonably certain and are not speculative. You see that?
Correct.
That's your opinion, isn't it?
It's not an opinion, but if you go through the guidelines, either use the IVS or the GAR, you'll find that it is guiding on this matter, on what should be the results of your evaluation.
So GAR is Global Arbitration Review, right?
Correct.
Now, but you would agree with me that if a particular valuation method leads to speculative results, the valuer should use a different method, right?
It depends on the asset you are dealing with, the environment surrounding the asset, and whether you could...
Sir, it's a very simple question. You say here in paragraph 20 that valuation method must lead to results that are reasonably certain and are not speculative.
Correct.
I'm only asking you to confirm that if a valuation method leads to a speculative result, you would have to choose a different method, right?
Correct. If you determine that it is speculative, I don't know how you can. If you've done your evaluation by submitting your report, then you can't call it speculative because that will still be in the process of valuation. You can't have a valuation report with speculative market value. This is not a valuation report at that time.
Yes. Now, let's move on and talk about your understanding of Winshear's or Helio Resources' history as a company. Now, if I understand correctly, your knowledge about Helio comes from your research into its company filings, right?
Correct.
And you have set out your findings in your appendix AMF, right? Let's look at that. So Appendix AMF contains summaries of a selection of Helio's companies filings, right?
Correct.
Now, you haven't included the underlying filings with your witness statements. You have only included these extracts, right?
Yeah, you can see there. They are only extract in that appendix. Yeah, correct.
And to be clear, there were actually many more filings, but you just included these selected ones here, right?
For the purpose, yeah, correct. Relevant to the task.
Okay, who selected these extracts? Was it you or the respondents team?
I went through the management discussions and analysis of the company and selected relevant extract for this purpose. Yeah.
So you selected those that would support your opinion, right?
I selected the extract that would indicate the company trends, especially from the period from 2004 to 30th September 2019.
Okay, now if I look at paragraph 86 of your witness statement, I understand your view is that Appendix AMF shows, and I'm using here your words, quote, that Winshear was in financial distress from as early as 2012, clearly lacked financial capability to develop the SMP beyond exploration stage, and was actively pursuing the property in line with its company mission.
Correct.
So when you select the extracts or summaries to include in your Appendix AMF, presumably you only excluded the extracts that you considered supported that opinion, right?
That's not what happened, but for that period that you're referring to, if you go to, I don't know if you have seen the management discussion analysis of Helio for that period, and you'll see that this was the discussion by then. So this was an event, yes. There was this situation in the company, and anyone, if could go through the management discussions, would pick this one up.
Okay, now let's talk about your view. I just read out in a bit more detail. Now, you say that Winshear was in financial distress from 2012 onwards, so let's start there. I'm looking at page 5 of Appendix AMF, the entry for the year ended 31st of March 2012. Now, if I look at this entry, I think it sums up Helio's financial business model quite well. So let's have a look at it. So if I see, it says that Helio's ability to create positive cash flow depended on either obtaining the necessary financing to obtain additional exploration and development of its mineral property interest. You see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Or it also mentions selling one or more of its mineral property interests as a mean to generate positive cash flow. See that?
Correct.
Now, and then it says below that Helio has no revenue, no source of operating income, right?
Correct.
And it then says near the bottom of that entry, the company has been successful in the past in financing activities through the issuance of equity securities, right?
Right.
Now, what we are looking at here is the standard business model for junior mining companies, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, now let's look at the entry for March 2012. Again, it says at the top, the company believes it currently has cash resources to meet its contractual obligations to March 31st, 2013. So, in other words, you would agree with me that Helio was financially stable at that point?
It depends on what you can understand by contractual obligation. That basically means salaries and some overheads, at least.
Yes,
and not developing the project.
Sure, but it was able to agree or to meet its contractual obligations, correct?
It was able to pay salaries, at least.
That's not what it says here, right? It says it was able to meet its contractual obligations, right?
If you go to the specific MDA, you'll see, this is a summary of the MDA. If you go to that MDA, you'll see. Because at one time, around that period, I think the company had like $20,000 in
Okay.
bank balance. Yeah, I can go through that.
Now, but can we at least agree that there was sufficient cash resources, and that's what you wrote, to meet the contractual obligations, but that it was reliant on obtaining cash flow either by financing or selling assets to continue the exploration?
Can you allow me to refer you to get the answer from page 7 of the same, just there, I think you're on page.
Sir, I'm looking at the extract that you put together for the year ended 31st of March. Now, I'm just putting your words back to you that you have written there, sir.
And I'm telling you that I have that answer in page 7.
Yeah, that's...
In fairness to the witness, we should look
Sure.
at page 7.
Yeah.
Where on page 7?
Okay, so there, right there, on that
That's
first
on
March.
the, for the report year ended 31st of March 2014, right?
Correct,
That's 2 years later, isn't it?
correct.
How
So-
is that relevant for the year 2012?
Following all the efforts between 2012 and March 2014, it was reported in Outlook that the company completed fiscal year 2014 with working capital of $20,000.
I'm not disputing that, Mr. Mongakala. I don't think we disagree. What I was saying is that, as you put it, the company was able to meet its contractual obligations, but it had to rely on generating cash flows either through obtaining investment, financing, or by selling assets.
Correct.
Now, let's move on a year to 31st of March 2013. So under liquidity, capital resources, and cash flow analysis, it says, while funds were raised subsequently to year-end, management remains concerned about the company's ability to raise additional funding amid ongoing uncertainty in global financial markets and the prevailing investment climate of risk aversion, right? So in other words, Helio was trying and managed to raise more money after March 2013.
Correct, and maybe you should, the same sentence that you have highlighted.
Yes, and it was still management, but management was still concerned whether it actually could raise additional funding in the worsening economic climate. Is that a fair assessment?
Fair assessment, and they should. I think we'll keep that for the later stage. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's why I'm doing it with you. Now, when we go to the extract you just pointed to at page 7, for March 2014, we see that Helio signed a joint venture letter of intent for its Damara gold project in Namibia, right?
Correct.
And we can see below that Helio managed to raise some 4 million Canadian dollar by way of a private placement, equity financing in June and July 14, right?
Correct.
So it was again successful at financing its ongoing activities by issuance of equity securities, right?
Correct, and maybe you should take note that this is 10 years. Yeah, for the purpose of Appendix AMF, yeah. This is now 10 years down the road, and the company raised that much, yeah, correct.
Now, but we still see at the bottom, they included sort of boilerplate warning, although the company has been successful in the past, there can be no assurance, right, for the future.
Correct.
Now, if we go on to March 2050, now on page 8, we see that Helio has completed a new NI 43-101 mineral resource estimate for the project during that financial year, right?
Correct.
And it mentions again the 4 million private placement completed in that financial year.
Correct.
Now, if we go to the next entry for the quarter ended 31st of December 2015, so we are now looking at the outlook for 2016, right?
Correct.
Now let's look at the company's objectives at that time. It says the current objectives of the company are to evaluate all options for advancing the S&P Gold project to a production decision, right?
Correct.
So in other words, the company wanted to get the S&P Gold project to the stage of building a mine by whatever means possible, right?
That is not the meaning of that sentence.
Did it not want to advance the S&P Gold project to a production decision?
Was evaluating all options for advancing the SMP to the production decision.
Yes.
All options.
So it tried very hard to actually bring it to a production decision, right?
That sentence reads that at that stage, Helio was evaluating all options for advancing the SMP Gold project to a production decision.
Yes, but it was actually quite difficult. If we go over to page 9, looking at what it says on the financial capability and additional financing in the middle of the page, we see once again it says the company's ability to continue as a going concern is dependent upon a number of factors, principally the company's ability to create positive cash flow in the short term, right? See that?
Either by obtaining the necessary financing to undertake additional exploration and development of its mineral property interests, by creating one or more joint ventures with a partner in order to achieve the foregoing, or by selling one or more mineral property interests. So this refers to the all options in the previous.
Exactly,
yeah.
but the situation wasn't good, was it?
By reading that, yeah, there was a concern.
There was a concern. Now, if we go to the bottom of the page, we see an entry for the end of December 2016. See that?
Yes, I can see.
So in May 2016, Helio sold its Namibian project to a company called Osino Resources, right?
Correct.
For some 456,000 Canadian dollars.
Correct.
That's not really much, isn't it?
Correct.
Now, when we turn to page 10, and we look at liquidity, capital resources, we again see management is currently reviewing all options available with regards to future financing options. Right?
Correct.
Now, this is in the outlook at the end of 16 for 17, right?
Correct.
Now, can we agree, and I think we don't agree on this, Mr. Wangakala, but would we agree that in early 2017, Helio urgently needed cash to continue as a going concern?
Correct.
And can we also agree that it had already sold off all its other assets to raise as much cash as it could to finance the S&P Gold project?
Not necessarily the S&P project based on what was going on, but including the S&P project.
But it has not sold the S&P project at
Correct.
that time. Now, Mr. Wangakala, I would like to discuss something with you that is neither in your nor Ms. Wall's witness or expert statement, but I hope you can follow along with me as you confirm to discuss economic concepts relevant. And I think the questions that I have to you in this context were triggered by arbitrator Johnson yesterday. Now, let us talk about the difference between valuing a company and valuing an asset. Now, can you assume with me for a moment that we are looking at a company which owns only one asset?
For the purpose of...
For the purpose of our hypothetical discussion that we are having now.
Including the S&P project. Yeah.
We are not talking about the S&P project. It's a hypothetical that I would like to discuss with you, and that hypothetical was triggered by a question from arbitrator Johnson yesterday. And I agree it's in neither your nor Ms. Wall's reports. Now, please assume with me that a company owns only one asset, and the fair market value of that asset is 100. Are you with me?
Yeah, you have put the assumptions, yeah.
Of course. And let's assume this company is publicly traded. Now, please assume also that the company always has access to enough liquidity to operate the asset. So there are no liquidity constraints or fears that the company is not a going concern. Would you agree with me under these assumptions that the market capitalization of that company would essentially be around 100, the fair market value of the single asset that company is owning?
So you mentioned something like operating the asset. What do you mean by that?
Well, to operate an asset can be a, let's say, power plant, can be a mine, can be an oil well. You need you need cash to operate that asset, which has a fair market value, we assume, of 100.
Yeah, you have mentioned different kinds of assets, and most of them may be producing assets. Mm-hmm. And this was an exploration project, so at times it won't be like operating. Operating is not the correct word, maybe.
Sir, I'm using a hypothetical example. I'm not saying that the company
so
we are looking at
let's
is
assume
Winshear.
it was a mine.
Yeah, let's assume it was a mine. Yes, so. Okay. Now, do we agree that if that company has access to enough liquidity to operate that asset, that mine, for instance, the fair market, the market capitalization of that company would be roughly equal to the fair market value of the asset? Here, 100. Would you agree with that?
For a public traded company,
Yes.
yeah, you can get the value in the market. Yeah.
So, let's assume differently that our company that owns the same asset that has a fair market value of 100 is in financial distress. There is a distinct probability, let's just assume that there is a distinct probability that the company that we are looking at is unable to operate its asset because it lacks the cash necessary. And there are even doubts that the company is still a going concern. And the market knows about these difficulties because of company filings. Now, would you agree with me that the share price of that company that we are looking at now would deteriorate significantly?
You are talking about basic market principles, say for securities or listed companies. So we have market conditions that apply to all players in the market or players in the industry, which so is a common thing that from time to time, say stock prices will go up and down depending on the market conditions and all the other factors. So it's a common thing, yeah.
Sir, I'm not talking about market conditions. I try to exclude the market conditions at the moment. I'm just looking at the financial condition of our hypothetical company. Now, if there is a risk that the investors will not get back their money because the company doesn't have the cash necessary to operate, or there's a doubt that the company has the cash necessary to operate that asset, would you agree with me that the share price would go down significantly?
Yes, you've mentioned share price. So you are talking about, you are again back to the market conditions, where in this case, the future of the company, if we see it's not promising, then automatically share price will go down.
And we agree that the share price could go down even if the price for the resource to be produced, nickel or gold or rare earth or whatever, goes up.
It depends on specific situation that you are dealing with, but we understand what the market. There are a number of parameters that apply to every stock in the market at one particular time.
Sure, but financial
including
distress.
Prices, financial distress, supply and demand for the same commodity and for substitutes.
Yes.
Technological changes.
Sir, I know you're not an economist, but bear with me, please. As economists, we use the concept of ceteris paribus. So that means all other things equal. So, of course, supply, demand, macroeconomic circumstances all play a role. And I think we are all in agreement. But what I'm trying to look at now is uncertainty in whether the company would be able to continue as a going concern. And let's focus on that. Do we agree that if there is doubt about the company's ability to continue as a going concern, the share price would fall?
For all reasons that I've put forward. Could fall or rise, yeah.
Now, if we agree that financial distress has a negative impact on the share price of a company, would we agree that the total market capitalization of that company is lower than the fair market value of the single asset the company owns?
Unfortunately, you are talking about very normal market environment. When you say it's a market, it means there is a seller who wants to sell the asset because of all the factors, including, you need working capital. The seller has reasons to sell the asset, and the buyer has reasons to buy the asset. So the two parties meet in what is called a market. So by the time we are having any transaction in the market, and we have always we have those transactions, there must be a seller who is willing to sell because of all the reasons that you have mentioned, and a buyer who is willing to buy because of all the reasons that we have. So what you are describing is a common determinant of having any transaction in the market in the first place. You can't have a transaction where there is no seller who is willing to sell and no buyer who is willing to buy. And in order for either party to have that willingness, there must be a situation. So, and what you are describing is the situation. Yeah.
I know it is very difficult for non-economists to grasp the concept of ceteris paribus, where we are trying to actually look at one specific parameter, and I'm trying to look at the parameter of financial duress of that company and the impact it has on the market capitalization. I think we have agreed before that the market capitalization of the company in financial distress would fall.
So you are confusing some words there. You are mentioning distress and sometimes duress. I don't know what exactly you are referring to. Are you referring to
the concern that the investors would not get their money back because the company could go bankrupt?
You are talking about distress?
Yes.
And not duress?
Yes. So if a company is in distress, you would agree with me that the market capitalization would go down, correct?
Because there will be pressure for the seller to sell the asset, and the buyer will be in a position to, will be interested at least to buy the asset. Yeah. So that's a normal market condition. Yeah.
And you would agree with me that the value of the underlying asset hasn't changed. It's still 100, right?
If you are talking about fair market value,
yes,
that will be the fair market value at that point. Because based on, say, as you've mentioned, if the seller is distressed and the buyer has cash to buy the asset, then the fair market value of the asset at that point will be at a certain point compared to some other situations.
Yes, and we agree that the fair market value of an asset can be different from the market capitalization of the company, correct?
Sometimes, yeah.
So now let's talk about the Shanta transaction. And I would like to take you to page 15, table 1 of your report, of your witness statement. Now I'm looking at the table, and I'll just try to summarize what you did, and you let me know if I'm getting anything wrong. So first you take the consideration envisaged by that Shanta transaction, right? That was 59,500,000 Shanta shares, correct?
Correct.
And then you take the Shanta share price at that date, which is the 19th of June 2017, right?
Correct.
And using that share price, you work out what you say was the value of 59,500,000 Shanta shares at that transaction date, right?
Correct.
Now, let's look at some assumptions that method relies on. And I think you assume that the 59,500,000 Shanta shares reflect the fair market value of the S&P Gold project, correct?
Based on the arrangement agreement, this was what was disclosed here.
Yeah, that's what you assume here as the basis, right?
This was the put on press release.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, sir. I think we are in agreement. You assume that this was that 59,500,000 Shanta shares are the fair market value for the S&P Gold project at that time, right?
Not only the S&P project, but of the whole Helio Resources Corporation based on that arrangement agreement.
Okay.
So there is a premium on that.
And you agree with me that at that time, Helio Resources only had one asset, the S&P Gold project, correct?
At that time, Helio Resources, in terms of exploration projects, had sold almost all of the previous projects, say in Namibia and elsewhere, and the S&P was the exploration project.
It was the only project at that time.
Not the asset, not the only asset, but only the exploration project.
Now, when you say that the 59.5 million Shanta shares reflect the fair market value, you would assume that Shanta was a willing buyer and Helio was a willing seller, right?
As long as there was an agreement, then a willing buyer and a willing seller met and agreed to that valuation.
And you assume that each Helio and Shanta try to maximize its financial gain, right?
Helio had needs, and the Shanta, because it is close to the asset we are talking about, it was also in the best interest of both parties. It was put by, as you'll see later. So yes.
And you assume that neither Shanta nor Helio was under duress, right?
Correct.
Now, did you review Mr. Williams's first witness statement before you wrote your statement, Mr. Mongakala?
Some sections here.
Okay, let's have a look at Mr. Williams' witness statement, tab 12, and let's go to paragraph 110. Now, Mr. Williams explained that Helio was in a vulnerable position at that time the parties agreed the Shanta deal. You're aware of that?
Helio was in a vulnerable position.
Yes. You see that?
Yes.
You didn't mention this evidence in your witness statement, did you?
Maybe if you can define what was the vulnerable position. In my view, was in vulnerable position because of the stage of development of the project after more than 10 years of investment, and at that time there was no, based on the 2015 resource estimate, it became clear that the deposit was not enough to establish an standalone mining operation. So yes, it was vulnerable. That's my understanding, based on the MDAs that I've referred to.
And did you take into account that Helio was in a financially vulnerable position at that time?
Yeah, it was vulnerable.
Did you take it into account when coming to the conclusion that the 59.5 million Shanta shares are the fair market value?
Helio was vulnerable based on market conditions because this is an exploration project, which is, as I have explained earlier, in order for there to be a transaction, there must be a willing seller. So based on conditions for this seller, there must be a situation that they may cause him to sell the asset, and the buyer is willing to buy that asset. So the market conditions, because this was a mineral deposit that now at this stage it was established that we can't have an standalone mining operation, that this was supposed to be sold at this stage, at least based on strategic statements found in the MDAs.
Sir, you seem to be, let me get that right, are you testifying on facts here or are you assuming facts? So are you assuming that Helio wasn't able to operate as a on a standalone basis, or are you assuming that?
The SMP project could not, there was no enough, at least there was no reserve, and even the mineral resources, there was no measured mineral resources. There were indicated resources and inferred resources. And based on the actual ounces that were reported by the 2015, I think, Snowden resource estimate report, it was determined that at this stage, the SMP project could not be developed to a standalone mining operation. So at this stage, it was determined that the best option among all the options that were referred to previously was to sell this asset. Yeah. And unfortunately, Shanta Gold was adjacent to this project, and that's why we had the June 2017 arrangement agreement. So it was purely on, if you are at least conversant with the exploration projects, you will understand that the Shanta transaction was the best option for the SMP, given that there was no enough ounces to develop a standalone mining operation.
It was the only option, wasn't it, at that time?
Was the best option.
The only option, wasn't it?
It was the best option.
Was there any other offer? Was there any other offer?
Yeah,
to buy the SMP Gold project?
The characteristic of
Sir, was there any other offer to buy the SMP Gold project at that time? Yes or no?
I don't have a press release, any other press release as of 19th June.
Okay, and we agreed earlier that Helio was under financial distress in early 2017, correct?
Because of the characteristics of the mineral deposit, yeah. It could not attract.
Now,
it could not be, it was determined that it could not be developed to a standalone mining operation.
Now, you ignored the fact that Helio was under financial distress when it concluded the Shanta transaction in June 2017, didn't you?
There was no duress, but based on the characteristics of the SMP project, the best option was to sell the project.
That doesn't take away, sir, that Helio was in financial distress at the time. Do you agree or not?
Financial distress is an outcome of the characteristics of the asset. Based on the 2015 Snowden report, it was determined that the SMP cannot be developed as a standalone mining operation at least not economically viable.
At
So
the gold
best
price at
option-
that time, correct?
Sorry?
At the gold price at that time?
I'm not talking about the gold price, I'm talking about the mineral resources, the deposit.
Now, sir, are you telling me that if but can we agree that you're not a geologist here?
I'm not a geologist.
Okay. Now, are you telling me that if Barrick or Glencore or another mining major owned the S&P Gold project at that time and someone wanted to buy it, then Barrick or the other mining major would have sold it for the same price as Helio in financial distress?
Unfortunately, you are comparing Barrick, one of the biggest gold mining companies, with a junior exploration company that has never developed a mining operation. So your comparison is, I don't know. You can't compare the two.
Sir, I'm asking you because we are undertaking a financial valuation exercise here.
Correct.
Is it your opinion, are you saying that if a mining major, Barrick or another one, would have sold the S&P Gold project in June 2017, it would have sold it for the very same price that Helio has sold it?
Because Barrick is a major mining company with several producing mining operations, I think it was Barrick could not have, maybe the environment would be different for Barrick because it's a mining company and not a junior exploration company with a track record of buying and selling the assets like what had happened in Namibia and all other places. So for this junior exploration company, we are in the right environment that we have a deposit that cannot be developed to a mining operation. The best option is to sell this asset, and the buyer was there, and the transaction, the agreement took place. Yeah, it was signed.
I'm sorry you're not answering my questions. Can we agree that if Barrick had sold the asset, the sales price would have been higher?
Barrick could have not sold the asset.
What do you mean by could have not sold? If Barrick owned the asset and had sold it at that time in June 2017, I put it to you, the sales price would have been significantly higher. Do you agree or not, Mr. Mongakala?
I don't agree.
You have no reason. You just said that if a mining major owned the asset, it would have been different.
The seller, we are talking about market conditions for this transaction, for the S&P as of 19th June 2017. So the seller in this case was Helio Resources. So Helio Resources, based on strategic decisions, had reasons to sell the asset. And on the other side, we have the buyer, the Shanta Gold. And based on strategic decisions of Shanta, they had some reasons to buy the asset. Mm-hmm. And these reasons are explained well. I think maybe we can go to that.
Okay, so are you telling this tribunal that the reasons why a transaction takes place is affecting the fair market value of that asset?
The reasons why the transaction, the market determines the fair market value of the asset at the time of the transaction.
So if the seller is in financial distress and sells it because it's in financial distress, are you telling me the fair market value would be different than if we had a company, a seller, like a mining major, that is selling the company at the asset at the very same time for different reasons?
The seller can only sell the asset at the price. price that it is acceptable to the seller, and the buyer was there, and the best option is to sell this asset to a mining operation.
Okay,
and the buyer will buy the asset at the price that it is acceptable to the buyer, and the two will meet in the middle, and that will be the fair market value.
And the value or the sales price would be determined by the reasons the seller wants to sell the asset, correct?
The market conditions, yeah, correct.
And these market conditions are subjective. They are individual. They are different for the junior miner and the large-scale miner, correct?
And the nature of the seller. Say if you are talking a junior exploration company versus a major mining company, the conditions for sale or for purchase and the parameters and the parameters that will be used could be different, and the resultant price could be different. And sorry.
Now, if we agree that the resultant price could be different depending on who sells it, we also agree that the selling price of that transaction isn't equal to the fair market value, because the fair market value doesn't distinguish between the reasons you sell, correct?
What we are going to level 2 of valuation, where we have something we call adjustments.
Okay, let's get there in a minute. Now, Madam President, I see we have been going for a good hour, an hour and 15. Should we take a quick break, or do you want to continue?
Is a good time for you to break?
We can go on for another 10-15 minutes if you prefer.
That makes more sense
Okay.
to me, yes.
Now, in your witness statement, you say that when valuing businesses and business interests under the market approach, valuers should follow the IVS standards, section 20 and 30. Let's have a look at those standards. Tab 10, that's exhibit R50, page 31. And I'm looking at IVS section 20.3. You see that?
Yes, I can see it.
And I'm reading from the latter half of the paragraph where it says, when using the market approach under the following circumstances, a valuer should consider whether any other approaches can be applied and weighed to corroborate the value indication from the market approach. You see that?
Yes, I can see
And then you have a list of circumstances, right? That follows.
So, correct.
Now, looking at bullet point D in that list, you see that if the information on a recent transaction or recent transactions is not reliable, the valuer should consider other approaches, correct?
The highlighted one?
Yes, section or bullet point D.
D for danger.
Yes.
Correct.
Now, an example where information will be unreliable is the synergistic purchaser. Do you see that too?
Sorry, I don't. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Now, Shanta was a synergistic purchaser in the case of this transaction, wasn't it?
Correct.
Now, if we stay in that bracket, you also see that another example given of unreliable transactions are a distressed sale. You see that?
Correct.
And all the evidence available that we have seen over the last days point to a distressed sale, don't they?
Not correct.
You have agreed with me that Helio was under financial distress early 2017, correct?
The distress referring to here is not like the Helio one. Yeah.
But it is a financial distress, do we agree?
Yes, the word distress is there in the financial distress, but here, when we sell, it's a distress sale. We don't mean that when somebody needs, because for every transaction, in every transaction, somebody needs cash. In every transaction. In order for there to be a transaction, there must be someone who needs cash, and that is having a need for cash is not a distress, basically. But it's so what you are referring here to, distress sale, the word sale refers to the need for cash and the need for asset, sale. Distress sale, so we have double distress there. There is somebody who needs cash because has no cash, but maybe there is now duress for that to occur, for the transaction to occur. So by sale itself, it refers to that need for cash, sale, when you sell something.
Now, I'm not sure I can follow you, sir, but can we agree that the fair market value concept assumes a motivated seller, but not a seller that desperately needs to perform the transaction, because it doesn't have
Sorry, can you repeat?
the cash necessary?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can we agree that the fair market value concept assumes a motivated seller, but not a seller which desperately needs the transaction to go ahead because it needs the cash?
Need for cash is a motivation for sale. Yeah.
And do we agree that there are various degrees on need for cash? And that if you desperately need cash because otherwise the company would go bankrupt, that would qualify as a distressed sale?
No, not correct.
Now, by the time of the Shanta transaction, President Magufuli's government had already taken a number of measures in relation to allegations against Acacia Mining, right?
I don't know where you are.
Yeah, let's look at them.
Okay.
Tab 16, Exhibit C, 277, page 1. So can we agree that in March 2016, the government of Tanzania filed a $41 million tax claim against Acacia?
I can read that, yeah, correct.
And then on page 2, it was said that this was in the context of the government attempting to, I quote, squeeze more tax out of investors, right?
I don't know which paragraph you're reading.
Sorry, it wasn't the quote, sir. It said the paragraph, it's the third paragraph on the page where it says mining and energy companies in Tanzania have said they have come under increased regulatory pressure in recent years as the government has sought to boost its share of the revenue.
Sorry, maybe I can explain this. First, you are referring to an article.
Yes, by Reuters, correct?
By Reuters. And secondly, this paragraph is about mining and energy companies that have sought, that have come under increased regulatory pressure in recent years as the government has sought to boost its share of revenue. So revenue comes from mining companies, I suppose. and not exploration companies, based on this article.
But it's revenue from the mining industry, correct?
Revenue from mining companies.
And in August 2016, Mr. Magafuli's government then imposed a moratorium on Acacia's export of gold-bearing sands to Japan. Are you aware of that?
I can read. No, I don't know why.
No, it doesn't say it in that article. I can refer you to the article where it says that. If you need it, it's Exhibit C171 at tab 17. But I think you've been working in the Mining Commission at that time, so you probably should be aware of that.
Can you repeat, please? Sorry.
So just asking you to confirm whether in August 2016 the government imposed a moratorium on Acacia's export of gold-bearing sands to Japan.
August 2016.
Yep.
I don't recall that ever happened. August 2016. No, I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? Are you disputing that?
Maybe if you can show me.
Well, it's the article is dated early September 2016. 16, yes.
Maybe if you can refer to more sources, you'll see that maybe this is not correct.
Yeah, well, was there an export ban on Acacia's gold-bearing sand in August, September, or around that time in 2016? Yes or no?
No.
So the article is wrong and made it up.
I don't know because this is just an article.
Sir, but you have been at the Mining Commission at that time. Are you telling the truth?
My understanding is that as of 2nd September 2016, there was no ban of gold-bearing sand to Japan because I remember I even processed some maybe containers thereafter.
Okay, but can we agree that there was a ban and then that ban ended?
No, I'm not aware of what is being said in this article.
Okay. Now, also in 2016, would you agree with me that Mr. Magafuli was making public statements about issues he considered needed addressing in the mining sector? And let's look at Exhibit C274 at tab 18. And Velma Law is a Tanzanian law firm, isn't it?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
Now, Velma Law is a law firm, correct?
Correct.
And that law firm was relaying a statement by President Magafuli in the second paragraph. It says, I quote, "Tanzania has lots of minerals, but there have been a lot of funny deals. We have to look carefully at our laws so that we can move forward as a country." That's what President Magafuli has supposedly said, correct? You see that?
Not correct, but this is what the Velma Law article says that Magufuli told a news conference. Yeah.
Now, are you aware that in February 2017, Mr. Magafuli withdrew a mining license granted to Acacia by presidential decree?
Don't know where you're referring to.
Tab 19, C280. Sir, you have very little recollection about that time.
Yeah, because we have all the information here, we can just... So you are referring to...
The February 2017 cancellation.
10th February 2017. Yeah, the article reads, cancelling of mining licenses may not be feasible.
Yes. And the mining advisory board actually told him that it was illegal, so he had to give back the mining license, correct?
I don't know where you are reading that.
So, you see there at the bottom, Tanzanian Mining Advisory Board fears that the compensation sought by investors will be considerable and that the country's image among other investors will be tarnished.
I can read that here.
The reason was that the advisory board thought that the investors would sue Tanzania for compensation. Correct?
I don't see that in this article.
And you're also aware that in around March, so just a month later, Mr. Magufuli declared a ban on exporting unprocessed gold and copper from the country. And if you need another article to refresh your memory, tab 20, C 172, page 1. It's a Financial Times article.
I can read that, but you are talking about bans or ban of gold and copper ore.
Yes.
Does this mean, is this the same article as the other one?
It's not, no, it's not, and it's a different measure.
It's a different measure, but for ban of gold and copper ore.
Yes.
Is this the same as mineral sand?
No, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's a different measure, sir.
I mean, you said in September there was a ban. I want to refer to that relative to this one. So which one is correct?
Sir, we have talked about the ban in
September
August, September,
2016.
or in summer 2016, and now I'm referring to another ban of exporting unprocessed gold and copper, not sand, and that ban was in March 2017. So now we are looking at a measure in 2017, sir.
Do you see the word ore? Copper ore.
Or, yes, I think we are in agreement, sir.
So, did you understand the word sand in the other article? Minerals.
Sir,
that was mineral sand, and this is gold and copper ore.
Yes, we are in agreement, sir.
No,
we don't have a dispute.
I wanted to explain that you said in August, September 2016, there was a ban. If there was a ban, what again is being banned on this in March 2017? If there was a ban in, was it September 2016? You said there was a ban. Can we go back to that?
It was C171.
Okay. Yeah. This was. Can you see the date for this one?
That was September.
So this was September 2016, and it says 1 month after ban of exporting gold-bearing sand to Japan, okay, for processing. And in March, we have also ban for the same company for gold and copper ore.
Exactly. So a lot of bans. Can we agree on that?
So if we have a ban in March, so what it means there was a continuation of some sort between September and March? Or February?
Okay, sir, let's move on. Can we just agree that there were several bans by the government? And I think what is important now is if you look at the article, the Financial Times article in C172, the first paragraph.
Sorry, Madam President. Just a point of interference. I think it is fair for the witness to be able to clarify between these two issues. So maybe he's given that opportunity to also clarify, because two documents have been put in front of him. So he's given that opportunity to explain his understanding of the two documents. That will be helpful.
Sir, I think you can do that in redirect, and I'm not disputing with the witness that
sorry,
there are several bans.
I'm
No,
not
maybe
addressing you.
Maybe while we're
Unfortunately.
on this, it will be helpful to the tribunal if you explain your understanding of these two bans. I understand there was one in August 2016 that is referred to in C-171. That is an article from the 2nd of September 2016. And there is the other article, C-172, which dates from March 2017 and speaks of what I understand to be another ban, because it's on gold and copper ore, whereas the other was gold bearing sand.
Sand. Yeah.
But maybe you explained, because you said there was no ban in
Yeah.
August, so I was not really sure what your position was on that. Maybe you explained that
There
first.
was no ban in September 2016.
But was there one in August? Was some kind of a moratorium or something like that?
Yeah, so I said I don't know, because it is an article. So, but my recollection, I don't remember.
You don't remember there being
that
a
there
ban?
was a ban, any ban in September 2016. And proof of that, because we have another article talking about ban of the same commodities for the same company in March 2017. So there is a confusion. And again, but these are just articles.
But are you saying there was no such ban in March 2017?
Now
or
we
do
are
you
at-
not remember, or?
Now we are at this now.
Yes.
But I was just referring, we saw another ban previously. So
Yes.
what is being banned, because it's the same commodity basically for the same company. So if it was banned, if there was a ban in September 2016, so what again is being banned again in March? What happened between September and March? So I conclude that there was no ban maybe previously, and maybe now we focus on this.
Fine. And was there a ban in March 2017?
So we are here now. Maybe
Yes.
we can continue.
So maybe you can answer that. And
Yeah, I can read the newspaper that Kasha Mining was hit with a ban of gold and copper ore
does
exports.
that match was your recollection?
Yes, I remember there was a standoff between the government and Kasha.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Thank you very much for your
We
assistance.
get to a time where at some point we should have a break, but I don't want to cut you off if you're in
I
a
think
sequence.
let's have that break in 2-3 minutes.
That's fine, of course.
Now, sir, would you agree that the Financial Times reported in March 2017 that the export ban for unprocessed gold and copper ore declined the Acacia share price by as much as 20%?
I'm not aware of the percentage that you are referring to. Maybe if we can read in the article.
Yes, it's the first paragraph just above the picture.
Correct. The article reads that, yeah. And it's also referred to
Can
in...
we just scroll down, please?
Yes, sure.
Sorry. Yeah, can we go to paragraph 5 or 6 down there? The shares in Acacia, yeah. Maybe it's talking about that drop.
Can we
Where-
agree that the shares fell quite dramatically after that ban?
I can read that shares in Acacia, which is a majority owned by Barrick, fell as much as 20% before recovering. They ended the same day, down 72 cents, or by 13% at 461 cents, reducing the company market value to 1.9 billion. So it was based on this. Maybe there was an announcement or press release or something on that day, which caused the drop in share price, but they recovered on the same day, at least by 7% on the same day.
Okay, sir, can we agree that the market valuation of the company dropped quite dramatically?
On that day,
On that day, yes.
yeah, based on the events.
Yes. And all the while,
Acacia.
the asset that Barrick or Acacia held was still the same, correct?
I'm not sure because I haven't seen what happened in the. We don't have any other information about that, but only we have this article that reads that way.
Yes. Acacia didn't sell the asset. And the asset still had the same amount of reserves, didn't it?
Correct.
Now, I think that's a good point for a break.
Yes. Mr. Mangakala, while you're on the witness stand, please do not speak to anyone about the case, your testimony, the facts, whatever it is. And the easiest way to make sure everybody understands you comply with this is just not to speak. But of course, you can go and get a coffee or whatever you like.
Thank you, Madam President.
Sure. Let's take 15 minutes and resume in 15 minutes. Ready on both sides?
Yes, Madam President.
Good. Dr. White, you have the floor to continue.
Thank you. Let's just remind ourselves where we stopped before the break. I was putting to you that in March 2017, in the wake of the government's actions, the Acacia share price fell by about roughly 20%. And now, Mr. Mangakala, would you agree with me that the actions against the mining sector by the government would have seriously depressed not just Acacia's share price, but also Shanta's share price during spring and summer 2017?
Not correct.
Okay, then let's have a look at the Shanta share price together. That's tab 22, exhibit VW2 4.2. Now, in that chart, we have the blue line, which is Shanta share price, and the green line, which is the ARCA Gold Miners Index. You see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. Now, I would like you to focus on the performance of the Shanta shares from early March 2017 onward. Maybe we can increase the, or zoom in a bit. I want to see the scale at the left. Okay. Now, would you agree with me that between early March and late April, the Shanta share price dropped by around 20 to 30%, roughly?
From this chart, I can see that.
Yes.
I can see that from this chart.
Okay, that actually looks very similar to the, at least in the terms of the order of magnitude, to the drop that we have seen in Acacia around the same period, doesn't it?
I don't know that because I don't have that.
But can we agree that during that period between, say, early March and late April, the gold miners index remained relatively stable? I mean, it went up and down, there was some volatility, but in general, the trend was more or less stable.
I haven't seen that index.
Well, have a look at the green line, please.
Okay, referring to the Ituri's Alka Gold Miners Index.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And then let's look at beyond April, May 2017.
Excuse me, can you make it a
Yes.
little smaller so that we have the time scale?
Sure.
Yeah, thank
Sorry
you.
for that, Madam President.
Oh, thank you.
And please just let me know where I should zoom in, or if you need further explanation.
No,
Are you okay?
thank you. I'm
Would you-
fine. I'm fine.
You're fine.
Thank you.
I think it's important that you get that in if you want, Madam President. I see that you're trying to draw the lines. You can actually look at the figures in the data just underneath, and I'm happy to show that to you.
Good, thank you.
If you want to go to, you see line 590 or thereabout, you can see it. You can see essentially the Shanta share price, percentage movements, as well as the index. And when we look at early March 2017, of course there is volatility. We see the Shanta around 15%, and the index would be around 18%. And I'm talking about broad orders of magnitude. And then we go down actually to line 630, or around that line, end of April. We would see a value of roughly minus 15%. The Shanta share price, so a delta of approximately 30%. And the gold index would be around 15, which is in the at least same order of magnitude as it was in early March.
Mr. Book, those percentage changes are changes from January 5. Excuse me, yes. Microphone will turn on. Are those percentage changes?
Check all your own sound file either.
Microphone.
Yeah. Are those percentage
No, I mean,
changes from January 5, 2015?
correct, sir. This is indexed to January 2015. Yes, 2015. That's where the index starts. These are not absolute figures.
Those are all
So-
changes from that date.
From that date, in order to make the index and the Shanta share price comparable. Otherwise, you would have them at totally different levels, and you couldn't really compare them.
I
You
understand.
can, of course, re-index them at any date, but essentially the result is the same.
You answered my question. Good. Thank you.
Now, if we go up again to the chart, would you agree with me, Mr. Wangakala, that in summer 2017, when the amending legislation came into force and Acacia was slapped with a $190 billion US fine, the Shanta share price literally imploded.
Did you say bloated?
Imploded.
Sorry, I
It
don't know.
dramatically dropped.
I don't know what your source of how you came up with this comparison. You are mentioning about Acacia, is it?
Well, sir, Did the share price drop dramatically in summer 2017? Yes or no?
I don't see share prices here, but I see that you somehow have put percentages. You have come up with those percentages that this graph is about, yeah?
And can we agree that during the same time, summer 2017, again, the index remained relatively stable?
Sorry, I don't know. Can we talk maybe of, because I can see on the screen, we have January 2015 up to November 2019. So if you are talking about any trend, maybe can we talk about what happened in July, September, November 2015?
No, sir,
May
I'm interested. I'm
2016.
asking the question here. If your council thinks it's relevant to go to 2015, I'm happy for him to take you there, but I'm now asking you about summer 2017. And I want you to
Your
look
graph.
at the index.
Yeah, this graph on the screen shows that I don't know, we have two greens.
We have a blue and a green line. The blue line, the line below, the lower line
it's
is
a blue.
Shanta,
It's a blue.
and the green line, the line above,
Okay.
is the index.
Yeah, so the what you call blue line, yes, there is that on May, July. Yes, I can see that minus 30 something to minus 60 something.
Okay, and
Based
at the
on
same time, the index remained relatively stable, correct?
I don't know if that is the ALCA, the index you're referring to.
Yes, that remained relatively stable, correct?
Was, yeah, around 15.
Yeah.
Yes, the index was around 15 at that period, up and down.
Now, Mr. Mangakala, I put it to you that because of Tanzania's political situation in summer 2017, Shanta share price was dramatically undervalued compared to the index at that time.
You are putting a cause to what you have come up with, so I don't have any evidence on the screen that you are linking the Acacia mining standoff with the Shanta shares.
It's not just the Acacia mining standoff, it's the amending legislation as well, sir.
I don't have that evidence. I only have these articles from Financial Times and the other one that you are linking to the graph that you are on the screen.
Okay, sir. I think you will be glad that we are moving on to Miss Wall's valuation methodology. You agree with me that she uses the cost approach to value the SMP project, right?
Based on the definition of cost approach, my understanding is that Ms. Wall didn't use the cost approach.
Okay.
Because under cost approach, if you allow me to explain,
Now,
with cost approach, you're talking about reproduction or...
we will get into that, sir. We will get into that, sir. I just wanted to sort of focus your and the tribunal's attention now on a different topic, which is the cost approach used by Ms. Wall. And I would direct you to paragraph 36 of your witness statement, Mr. Wangakala. So if I look at what you stated there, is it correct that the cost approach provides an indication of value by calculating the costs it would take to replace or recreate an asset?
Correct.
Okay, and you explained there that it's actually 3 paragraphs later in paragraph 39 that when applying the cost approach, in your opinion, one should follow the guidance in IVS sections 70 and 80, correct?
Correct.
Now let's look at the IVS guidance. Tab 10, that's Exhibit R50, sections 70.10 and 11. It's on page 46 and following. Now the IVS 70.
Sorry.
Are you there?
Yeah, not yet. Maybe.
Okay. It's page 46, 47.
Is it tab 10?
Yes.
This is tab 10. Okay, there.
Now, when you start with section 70.10, it says that the cost approach should seek to capture all of the costs that would be incurred by a typical participant, right?
Correct.
Now, that means that if applying the cost approach, it would be appropriate to include all costs actually incurred towards the S&P Gold project when the tribunal applies the cost approach to value the S&P project, correct?
I don't know if you are reading the section 7011.
I'll just get to 7011 in a second. But you would agree with me that you would include all the costs actually incurred towards the S&P Gold project if you were to value the S&P Gold project using the cost approach.
Not correct.
So let's look at 70.11. It says that the costs should include all direct and indirect costs that would be required to recreate the asset, correct?
Correct. Required to replace or recreate the asset.
Yes. So if we look at the list that follows after the first paragraph, we see that it includes direct costs, but also indirect costs, right?
Maybe if you can go back to 7, up there, the first sentence. If you can start to read from the first line, please.
Yes, you read it.
The cost elements may differ depending on the type of the asset and they should include the direct and indirect costs that would be required to replace or recreate the asset.
Right. Yes, I don't think we are in disagreement, Mr. Mangakala.
You mentioned something like all, and there is no word all there.
Now, and these would be the costs that would be required to replace or recreate the asset at the valuation date, correct?
I can read it says some common items to consider.
Sorry, listen to my questions. These would be the costs that would be required to replace or recreate the asset at the valuation date, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And now we go to the items, the common items that you were just going to, that the valuer should consider to include. These are direct costs, correct?
Correct.
Indirect costs.
Correct.
And under indirect costs, we see a few examples of indirect costs. Right?
Yes, I can see the 8 elements.
Such as overheads.
Correct.
But then also, in subsection 8 or bullet point 8, it refers to a profit margin such as a return to the investor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now let's have a look at the following section, or at the following paragraph 70.12. And I would like to take you through that paragraph 70.12. So, when we start at the first sentence, it says an asset acquired from a third party would presumably reflect their costs associated with creating that asset, as well as some form of profit margin to provide a return on their investment, right?
Correct.
And then, as such, on the basis of value that assume a hypothetical transaction, and you would agree that fair market value as a value basis would require a hypothetical transaction, right?
Sorry, I don't know. Are you reading the same?
The second sentence.
Yeah, as much on the basis of value that assume a hypothetical transaction.
Yes, and can we agree that the base of value that we are looking at here, the fair market value, assumes a hypothetical transaction?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can we assume here that the base of value that is relevant for this tribunal is the fair market value?
Correct.
And can we also agree that the fair market value concept assumes a hypothetical transaction?
Correct.
So, in that case, it may be appropriate, and I read from the guidance, to include an assumed profit margin on certain costs which can be expressed as a target profit, either a lump sum or a percentage return on cost or value. You see
Correct.
that? Okay. So according to the IVS guidance, it is in principle possible to include a return. You would agree with me, wouldn't you?
Maybe if you proceed to the next
Exactly.
sentence.
I'm getting there immediately. I think we both want to get to that last sentence desperately. Now, here there comes a caveat, right? In the next sentence. However, financing costs, if included, may already reflect participants' required return on capital deployed. So valuers should be cautious when including both financing costs and the profit margin, correct?
Correct.
So, let me get this straight. If we are including financing costs as part of the historical costs, then we have to be very careful if we want to add an additional profit margin on top of that, right?
Maybe you are like forgetting what is being said on the previous sentence. The basis of that coming to this one. So this is a second item regarding financing costs.
Yes, so
Yeah.
if the valuer includes financing costs as part of the historical cost assessment, the valuer has to be very careful if she wants to include another profit margin, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, looking at financing costs of Helio, what would be Helio's financing costs? Do you have an idea?
Maybe if we go to the Helio statements, then we'll see what were the financing costs.
Now, could we agree that, typically financing costs would be somewhere, you could look at them either in Tanzania, then it would be probably Tanzanian bonds, Or in Canada, where you would have probably Canadian prime plus plus a margin, 2% or whatever an economically reasonable interest rate is. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
So, if we include, according to that guidance, in the historical cost approach, if we include financing costs such as Tanzanian bonds or Canadian prime plus 2, we have to be very careful if we want to add an additional profit margin, right?
Maybe I can explain that. It's not a yes or no.
Sure.
In the previous sentence that I'm referring you to, and also this one, we have the word may. So it starts at as such, and a base of value that assume a hypothetical transaction. It may be appropriate to include an assumed profit margin on certain costs, which can be expressed as a target profit, either a lump sum or a percentage of return on costs. It may be appropriate. And again, we have this another may here. So that may is, in your statement, is a substantial omission. It's important to keep that. So here you are assuming that you have already included that. You have already included an assumed profit margin. So you are proceeding to this one.
Yes, and
now under
if we are
valuation
including
process,
if we are including financing costs on the historical costs, we have to make sure that if we apply another profit margin, that we are not double counting, right?
correct.
I think the point of Mr. Mwangakala, if I understood you correctly, is that you only get there provided you have determined that it is appropriate to include a margin on certain costs.
After a process, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct, Madam President.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
But you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that finance costs would be costs that are to be included under 70.11
It says
as
if-
indirect costs, correct?
No, maybe if we start again with 70.11 at the beginning. We have the word may up there, depending on the type of asset, and they should include. So we have a list. So that list is it's a comprehensive list of items to be considered for inclusion. You may include, depending on the type of the asset. And again here, you may, if you go to 70.1.2, it may be appropriate to include assumed profit on certain costs. And again, in financing costs, if included, which is another may, you may include. Yeah, so there's a lot of caveats and consideration. So that is there is a process to determine that to proceed to the next step. It's not as simple as it reads there.
Okay, but
To determine whether a cost may be included or not is a process.
Okay, can we agree that this is in the discretion of the valuer?
Yeah, the valuer has to consider, analyze the information available, the facts available, in order to decide on these mays from 70.11 to 70.12.
Exactly, and if the valuer thinks that adding financing costs is appropriate to look at the replacement costs in today's dollars, then the valuer may add these financing costs, correct?
May, correct.
Okay. And if the valuer adds financing costs, the valuer has to be cautious if and when she applies another profit margin on top, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Mangakala, would you agree with me that under some circumstances buyers would be willing to pay more to have an asset immediately rather than having to recreate it, which would take several years?
That consideration is when you are processing, when you are doing the valuation, you go through that strategic assumptions by the buyer and the seller, and then the outcome of it will be the fair value for that asset, yeah, after considering that short term, mid term, and long term.
Sorry if my question wasn't clear. My question was, would you agree that under some circumstances, buyers would pay a premium to having the asset right now instead of having to invest the money and recreate it, when recreating the asset would take several years?
That is a consideration, yes.
Okay. Now can we please look at exhibit C421, and I think it's at tab 29, but I'm not entirely sure. Yes, tab 29. And maybe just look at the first chart. Now that chart is the gold price per ounce from 2003 to 2021 or 22.
Correct.
Mr. Mangakala, do you know what commodity cycles are?
I understand.
You understand?
Yes.
So commodity cycles typically are multi-year cycles during which commodity prices rise and then fall again, right?
Yeah, referring to market conditions. Yeah.
According to market conditions, correct. And we also have commodity cycles in the gold market, right?
Correct.
Now, let's assume for a moment we are in 2009. Now, would the purchaser of a gold asset be willing to pay a premium over the costs to recreate the gold asset from scratch if she can have it immediately, rather than having to recreate it during 5-6 years?
As of 2009, you cannot refer to the future, say 2010 going forward, because actually you don't know actual conditions. You can only forecast.
You would know future prices, wouldn't you?
If you mean future contracts?
Yes.
Yes, say a few months, yeah.
Yeah. Gold futures go up to 5 years, don't they?
Yeah, there are some contracts, yeah.
Okay, so if you had the choice to get a gold asset for the price of 100 in 2009, or if you had the choice to spend 100 and recreate it over the next 5-6 years, which option would you choose?
I don't know, you are already in some, are you doing valuation of an asset?
No, I'm not doing valuation
or you
of
are
an
just
asset.
in the market?
I'm just trying to find out which project or which decision a rational buyer or creator of an asset would do. Would he buy the asset, in 2009 for a price of 100? Or would he recreate, or would she recreate, sorry, the asset for a price of 100, but only get the asset in 5-6 years?
Yeah, you are choosing to ignore specific characteristics of that asset and of the surrounding environment.
An asset of equal utility, sir.
Yes, but for a mining project, remember, you cannot say shift or transfer an asset from, say, for this one, from Chunya in Tanzania to somewhere else. So conditions for that specific asset are specific to that particular asset at that time. They don't easily compare to other assets based on just this one chart.
Sir, the fair market value concept assumes the recreation of an asset of equal utility. So can we agree, I think the answer is obvious, that you would rather pay 100 today and have the asset immediately than spend 100 to recreate the asset over the next 5-6 years?
It depends on the characteristics of that asset,
Oh, an asset of equal utility.
of that particular asset.
Yes, of equal utility. Can we agree?
I think I've explained that.
Yes or no, sir?
It's not a yes or no, because as I've explained, it depends on that particular assets and
Sir, I think you're trying to avoid my question. We are, again, I know economics is not your major, but we are looking at it ceteris paribus. We are looking at an asset of equal utility. Yes, it's an economic term. That's an economic term of art. But this is how we are doing fair market valuations. We are looking at assets of equal utility. Which asset would you want to purchase? Would you want to purchase it today or in 2009 for 100, or recreate it in 2009 for 100 when you can only use it 5-6 years later?
for a hypothetical asset that based on this graph, this one graph, and no any other information, that's which, yeah, could be the decision. If for on this graph, that will be the decision.
And now, sir, I put it to you that you would even be willing, that the potential purchaser of that asset would be willing to pay a premium over the 100, over the cost of 100 that it would take to recreate the asset over the next 5-6 years.
Based on this graph, yes.
Yes, in 2009. Okay. Now, let's move forward. Let's assume we are in 2013. The same investor has to make a decision whether to recreate our hypothetical asset or buy it from a third party. Would you agree with me that in 2013, with gold prices falling, the buyer probably would not be paying a premium if he could have the asset right now, correct?
Again, as I've explained before, if you are ignoring the characteristics of the assets based on this single graph, yes.
Okay. Because during that declining market, she could actually take the time to recreate the asset from scratch, right? For the value, for the cost of 100.
Based on this graph.
So, would you agree with me that the willingness to pay a premium over historical costs depends on where in the commodity cycle we are? Whether we are the beginning or at the end of the cycle.
As I explained, if you choose to ignore the specific characteristics of the asset. You know nothing about the asset you're talking about, based on this single graph. Yes.
Now, let's look at 2018 or 2019. Would you agree with me, Mr. Mangakala, that we are at the beginning of a new cycle?
Yeah, correct.
Now, Mr. Mangakala, you're aware of the SIMVAL code for the code for the valuation of mineral properties, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. So SIMVAL is the Canadian Institute for Mining, Metallurgy and Petroleum, correct?
Correct.
Now, you actually refer to the SIMVAL code in paragraph 47 of your witness statement.
Correct.
And you explain in 47 and following bullet points how that SIMVAL code groups mineral properties into 4 categories, right?
Correct.
So we have exploration properties, we have mineral resource properties, we have development properties, and then over the page we have production properties, right?
Correct.
And am I correct that you would qualify the S&P Gold project as a mineral resource property? If it helps,
Correct.
you have it in paragraph 48.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's turn to the SIMVAL code. It's exhibit R64, which is at tab 10 of your bundle, and I would direct you to page 18, which is section 3.3.3 of the code. Now, at table 1, we see a table showing the valuation approaches that may be appropriate for different types of mineral properties, depending on their stage of development. See that?
Correct.
And we see that under mineral resource properties, it says the income approach is appropriate in some cases, right?
Correct.
The market approach would be appropriate.
I don't know the difference there. Yes.
And the cost approach, again, is appropriate in some cases, right?
Income approach in some cases, market approach, yes, and
Yes.
cost approach in some cases.
Yes. Good. Now, if you look further down on page 18, we see the heading valuation methods, right?
Correct.
And it says valuation methods, and I quote, are in general subsets of valuation approaches. Some methods are considered to be primary methods for valuation, while others are secondary methods or rules of thumb. You see that, right?
Correct.
And then in the next paragraph, it says table 2 lists a number of valuation methods for mineral properties, correct?
Correct.
Now let's turn over to that next page. We see table 2, right? And if we look at the bottom, there are actually 2 rows for cost approach, right?
Correct.
You see the multiple of exploration expenditure approach, and it's recommended as a primary method, right?
Yeah, if we have chosen that
Yes.
under that method.
And if you would have chosen the market approach, we see method market capitalization. You see that?
I can see that.
And market capitalization would only be recommended as secondary approach, correct?
You are omitting the first one. I don't know if you can see that. There are 3 actually.
Yes, sure. There are comparable transactions, option terms, and market capitalization, correct?
Comparable transaction is primary, option agreement terms primary, and market capitalization secondary.
Now, can you explain to this tribunal how the multiple of exploration expenditure approach works?
If you have chosen, through your evaluation process, you have arrived at an appropriate evaluation method that it should be cost approach, then by definition of cost approach, again, here it says in some cases, yeah, so it was not, there is a yes and in some cases. Now, if we have applied that in some cases, like in this case it has been applied, the definition of cost approach clearly indicates that it's about replacement or reproduction of that asset under definition. So here it reads, yes, there could be a multiple of past exploration expenditure if you are choosing the second one and not the appraised value. So it all depends. So to arrive at whether you go for appraised value or using the multiple past expenditure, I think they are both primary. In this case, you are focusing on the other one. So by multiple, it means that after determining the cost base, then you will find, you will determine a multiple to apply to that cost base to arrive at fair market value.
Sir, and let me go back at your at paragraph 89 of your witness statement. So I think we agree that it is your opinion that historical costs should actually be adjusted. Correct?
Paragraph 89?
Yes. Maybe you want to read the paragraph above. I don't want to take that away from you.
Yeah. 80.
So it is your opinion that if we are using historical costs as a proxy for the fair market value, these historical costs should be adjusted, right?
Yes, you are referring to a, say, principle here.
Yes.
In principle.
And these, when applying the historical cost approach, one has to make sure not to include inflated expenditures, right?
Correct.
And one also has to make sure to adjust the historical costs according to post-expenditure or post-investment market conditions, right?
And to not consider the post-expenditure or post-market conditions, which can make some costs completely reversible.
So you would have to adjust some costs to post-investment market conditions, correct?
Maybe adjustment is not a correct word. It depends on an actual asset, the characteristics of that asset, the information that you have, and what you have to omit or include. And then the next level could be adjustment.
Okay. And the multiple of exploration expenditure tries to adjust historical costs to market conditions, correct?
That is the advanced level of valuation. After you've concluded your cost base, now
Yes.
you go to the multiple.
And obviously, that could go up or down. You would agree with me, right?
If you are talking about the multiple by itself, but
Yes.
as a process, the multiple is dependent on the cost base that you apply the multiple to.
Good. Now, Mr. Mangakala, I think I'm very close to finishing. And let's go to interest. I promise you it won't be as traumatic as last time. Do we agree that the appropriate interest rate that should be applied here in this case is Canadian Prime plus 2?
Yeah, according to that valuation report, yes.
According to, sorry, I didn't get that.
According to valuation, this valuation, yes, we arrived at that
Yeah, I mean that's your
2%.
valuation. So
Yes.
you agree with Canadian Prime plus 2.
2%.
Okay. Now, we've had a question from Madam President yesterday, which was left a bit in limbo, and which I'm trying to explore with you. Now, Mr. Mwangakala, what is Canadian prime rate in terms of interest?
Canadian prime is a primary rate, bank rate, normally determined by the central banks, and which is used as a benchmark for other financial institutions
Yes.
to add on as interest rate.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Mangakala, that the prime rate is often used as a proxy for a risk-free rate?
Correct.
Now, would you agree with me that companies such as Helio, Winshear, are not able to borrow at the risk-free rate?
Helio, yes, would buy would get a loan from a financial institution somewhere, or funders.
But they would not be able to borrow at the risk-free rate of Canadian Prime, right? They would have to pay more to get funding.
As indicated there, and based on the guidelines that we have, with consideration of all that you are saying, the appropriate rate to cover for that is a 2% margin. Yeah.
Okay. I think we agree, Mr. Mwangakala. So I think that concludes my cross-examination.
Thank you. Do the respondents have questions? Do you need a few moments just to confer?
Yes, Madam President. I think one or two questions.
Yes, sure.
So, Mr. Mwangakala, you were asked a question about the Shanta transaction. I think the reference was made to first witness statement of Mr. Richard Williams.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Mr.
The first witness statement of Mr. Richard Williams, I think from paragraphs 109 to 110. Can we have that on the screen? And then, are we there? I wanted it to be on the screen, yes. 109, 110. And you were asked several questions on this aspect, issues of financial distress, etc. Now, what would be your comment on the Helio Shanta transaction in respect of those questions you were asked?
Yeah, regarding the Helio Shanta transaction, which occurred on 19th June 2017, my position regarding the transaction that it was a perfect market transaction between a buyer and a seller, and that was again confirmed by, I don't know if it's there is a press release that was released by the CEO of Helio Resources, I think on 9th, on 6th September, the same year. I don't know if we can see that, because it again confirmed, reconfirmed my position that the Shanta transaction was a perfect transaction between a buyer, a willing buyer, and a willing seller.
So do you want, is this the one you are referring to?
Sorry, if we can go up and see. Yeah, this should be the one.
Okay.
Yes, this news release, yes, of 6th September 2017.
Okay. Thank you.
And I can remember, maybe if you go to paragraph 3 of that. Yeah, paragraph 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my position, which is matching what Helio CEO said, is that I, and maybe the CEO at that time, strongly disagree with Shanta's assertion that the changes in Tanzanian mining laws amounted to material adverse effect as defined in the agreement of 19th June of the same year, which was like 3 months before, and was after. This statement was released after the Mining Act, the amendment of the Mining Act in July 2017, so this was 2 months after. So the CEO rejected the Shanta's opportunistic attempt to walk away from the obligations, and that combining Shanta and Helio continued at that time to make sense for both companies, again, as I explained regarding the strategic decisions for the deposit, which had no significant gold ounces for a feasible standalone mining project. And the CEO and I were disappointed that Shanta in the transaction chose to terminate the agreement, which was a drastic step without any prior discussion. So this was my position at that time.
Oh, thank you very much, Madam President. We have no further questions.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have questions? Yes?
Yes, it's working. Mr. Mankakala, I have one question for you. If you will, please assume, and it is an assumption, that I agree with you that the Shanta transaction provides a useful indicator of fair market value as of the middle of 2017. But assume also that I agree with claimants that that value was depressed by actions taken by the Tanzanian government that are challenged by claimants, and that the value of Shanta's shares continue to be depressed and even further depressed all the way through 2019 by actions of the Tanzanian government that are challenged by claimants. And what I wish to do is use the Shanta transaction to arrive at a fair market value in 2019 that is unaffected by the actions of the Tanzanian government that are challenged by claimants. What do I do?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So there you are talking about the adjustments that have to be made. So the Shanta transaction or the arrangement agreement of June 2017 will be used to determine, will be the basis for which you will do some adjustment to arrive at appropriate fair market value at any valuation date. So I agree there should be some adjustment and which were considered during this valuation.
And what are those adjustments? Make the second assumption that I made. You've
Yes.
taken my first assumption, now make the second assumption, which is I agree with claimants that the value of Shanta's shares over time were depressed by the actions of the Tanzanian government challenged by claimants. And I wish to ignore that effect. I want to come up with a value that ignores the effects of the actions taken by the Tanzanian government. What do I do to achieve that end?
Correct. First, on the effect of what you refer to as actions of Tanzanian government. Yeah, then first you have to determine the impact. And the impact of that, of what you call actions of Tanzanian government, were confirmed by the CEO of the owner of the company and the owner of the asset at that time, Mr. Richard Williams, in his September 2017 press release to shareholders of the company. Not a newspaper article, which of course is the source of what you are referring to as the impact, but the owner of the company and the owner of the asset, Mr. Richard Williams,
Okay.
after the amendments of the Mining Act, released a statement to shareholders about his company, including the asset, that the 2017, that if you can highlight second paragraph.
I've seen it. We don't have to go through that. I
Yeah.
know what that says.
So,
Let me go to my next question. I know what that says. Can we have the chart that was up before, VW 2-4.2? Mr. Walt, you put that up on the screen. If you could put that up again, that would help me. You know, that's the ARCA index and Shanta share price chart. There it is.
yes.
All right. Let me ask you then, is it your view that the decline in the Shanta share price shown in that chart compared to the ARCA Gold Miners Index, that decline is unrelated to actions taken by the Tanzanian government?
The so-called actions taken by the Tanzanian government had no adverse effect to the agreement between Shanta and Helio, as confirmed by the CEO of the company.
What if I disagree with that? Assume I conclude they did have an effect.
Yeah, the non-owner,
And I want to adjust for that. I've concluded they did, I just said, I agreed with claimant in my assumption. They did have an effect. What do I do to ignore that effect?
then you have to go to the market again to establish, say, for a similar asset, not the whole of the mining industry, but for a junior mining exploration company, a junior exploration company with a deposit with the qualities of the SMP project for the period, say, from July to September, while we have the owner of the asset, the owner of the company, confirming that after analysis that there was no adverse effect, for the non-owner of the asset or evaluator to come up with a different view, then you can weigh which ones you should give more weight. So at least you'll take an average of a number of analysis to come up with the appropriate adjustment. There will be some adjustment, but I'm talking about what you should consider.
So I shouldn't look, in your view, I should not look at the ARCA Gold Miners Index. I should find another junior mining company with assets similar to those of Winshear's.
Correct.
Okay.
That will be one factor.
Do you have questions for the witness?
He's asking. My co-arbitrator has asked. My co-arbitrator has asked the questions I wanted to ask.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were. Mr. Mangakara, speaking of the Shanta share price, I'm not focusing on what you've just been asked, but on other questions. The Shanta share price was set, was agreed in June 2017. Our date of valuation, you took January 2018. The claimant takes as a primary date December 2019. If we were to take as a basis was adjustments, that's not my point now, the Shanta price, how would we then adjust for the fact that the time has passed until we get to the date of valuation?
Yeah. Madam President, for the case of adjusting the Shanta or the share price of Shanta from June 2017 to valuation date of sometime December 2019, you have to consider a number of parameters, factors, including what happened within Shanta, which was the buyer, would have been the buyer of this asset, what happened in the market, as we have seen what has been tried, the graph was trying to show here. So there will be a number of factors, including what happened within Shanta and what were the market conditions generally and for gold.
Do I have the elements in the record to which you could point me that would allow me to make these adjustments?
Yes, we included what happened within Shanta. And regarding the gold price,
We have
the effect of gold price,
421.
yeah, the effect of gold price is found in what happened, say, to Shanta share price. The changes in the share price of Shanta is an interpretation of what is happening in the market.
So you're saying that if I simply take the difference in Shanta share price, this would
Yeah,
include the evolution of the gold price?
exact. The market trends, yeah, regarding the gold price. Because, say, between July 2017 and December 2019, if we have the gold price trend was, say, the futures were promising, that will be reflected in Shanta shares. That will see there was an increase in Shanta shares. But also, I included any dividends that have been paid during that period. Now, they should also go to, should be a part of the adjustments, yeah.
When you were asked questions about whether Helio was under distress, and you talked about the need to sell the asset or the company, you mentioned that it had been that on the basis of the management discussion and an analysis and strategy statements, you had concluded that a sale was needed because the mine could not be operated as a standalone operation.
Yeah, we could not get
Can you
to...
refer to, is it somewhere in your report?
Yes.
And I have missed that? Or can you refer me to this, to your appendix? I think it's AMF, most precisely.
Maybe if you can refer to my statement,
Yes.
starting paragraph 78, page 18. There I have included an assessment of the SMP project. So together with that,
No, I understand what you're saying.
okay.
It's a mineral resource property, but so I would need to review the MD&As.
in paragraph 86, I've also included that.
Fine. So essentially, I don't have the detail here that I'm looking for. I would need to look at your appendix AMF.
Yeah. That was from 2012, 2013, 2014.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. One of the criticisms of the claimant to your use of the Shanta transaction is that it was never completed. What do you answer to this?
The Shanta transaction, the agreement was there as of...
The agreement was signed, but then
Yes.
but there was never a closing.
Yeah, there were a series of events.
Yes.
The agreement was signed, at least press release indicates that there was an agreement as of 19th June. Then the Mining Act was passed around the first week of July. Then in August, sometime August, Shanta issued another press release to terminate the agreement, termination of the agreement. And on 6th September, CEO of Helio came up with that statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know all that.
Yes.
But why is it, in your opinion, safe to, usually when we do a market approach and look at comparable transaction
yes.
or even actual transactions, they are transactions that have been
Yes.
materialized. Here it is not. So why is it nevertheless, in your opinion, justified to look at this transaction?
Yeah. Yeah. So based on that timeline of events, because the Shanta transaction, or call it the agreement, was entered or signed before the passing of the Mining Act in
Yes.
July, and then Shanta terminated the agreement because of the Mining Act, as explained by Shanta, if you go to their
Yes.
statement.
Yes, it's clear.
The agreement was terminated because of the Mining Act that was passed in July. But the agreement between Shanta and Helio was entered
Predates.
before the Mining Act.
Yes.
So you can see that the reason for the termination was the Mining Act. The CEO said the Mining Act had no adverse effect, and actually the agreement was entered before the Mining Act. So you can see the transaction was perfect, at least the agreement.
So you're saying that there's two reasons. One, it predates the
Yeah.
amending legislation, and two,
Yes.
the CEO
Yes.
expressed the opinion that it had no that the amended legislation
Yeah.
had no material adverse effect. Is that
Yes.
what
So the transaction was perfect.
There's another point that is raised, is that the Shanta share price does not reflect the value of the merged entity that arises from the would have arisen from the transaction. What would you say to that?
I agree that should also be included in the adjustments.
That's an adjustment.
Yeah, as was asked by.
Yeah. Yeah. On the cost approach, were asked many questions, so I'm not going back to those, but you say in your witness statement that the cost approach may overestimate an asset value, but have you verified the inputs used by Mrs. Wall? Have you found any indication of overestimation?
Correct, Madam. I've done that, yes.
You have done it?
Yes, correct.
Oh.
And maybe to add more, that based on the characteristics of the asset, this was not, the dispute is about part of the project, not the whole project. So it has some complications on which part of the project is involved.
Why are you saying the dispute is about part of the project?
Yeah, the dispute is about stem from cancellation of 4 retention licenses. Now, 4 retention licenses cover about a quarter of the whole area.
Yes.
And the other 75% of the area, roughly 75%, is covered by other 9 prospecting licenses which were not involved in the dispute.
I understand
So
what
that
you're saying
complicates.
now, but I read your statement as what you were doing was quantifying the SMP project as such, and it's rather at the beginning of your statement, but you know it better than I do, where you define your mission. Do you remember where it is?
I think on the choice of the evaluation method should be somewhere.
No, it's in 10, for paragraph 10, for instance. My role is to quantify appropriate compensation. No, the right, I think it says to quantify the fair market value of Winshear's investment in the SMP.
Correct.
So that is not the part related to the retention licenses, as you tell me now.
Yeah, maybe I should explain. Now, because of the characteristics of the asset, that it had some parts involved in the dispute, and the majority of the remainder of the project was still in operation, or still the Perfect Tanzania was having retention prospecting licenses.
Yes.
So in choosing the appropriate evaluation method, if you are considering that complication, that it will lead you to what should be the primary evaluation approach. So if you try to use cost approach in that complication, you will end up with the inflating costs, because some of the costs were used, say, in both parts, the disputed, the part under dispute, and the other part. So cost approach would always complicate the, say, cost base that you would apply in this.
Yeah,
so that affected my choice of also evaluation. What should be the primary evaluation approach?
But you use a subset of market approach, and you rely on the Shanta transaction. That is not linked to the retention licenses. That covers the entirety of the project.
Exactly. So that includes a premium, which also will affect the adjustments. There is a premium because the the dispute is about part of the project. So if you value the whole of the project, because we have a precedent transaction, which was only 2 months back, that will also include a premium on the remainder of the, whatever value that you arrive at will have a premium because it will have considered even parts that are not under dispute. So that will be also included in the adjustment.
You clarified the date of valuation, so that is clear. No, I have no further questions in that case.
Thank you, Madam
Yes,
President.
sure.
This often happens with me when I listen to the questions of the other members of the tribunal. It triggers additional questions. Getting back to how we would adjust the Shanta price. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've learned in this case is by far the single most important variable that affects the value of a gold mining enterprise is the price of gold and the expected trends in the price of gold. Since what we're valuing here is this asset, what you were valuing the S&P project, we're valuing the S&P project, and we've got a number for that as of June of 2017 in the Shanta transaction. If all we want to do is value that project, and that is all we want to do, I think, and we want to start with that Shanta number, why would we look at anything other than changes in the price of gold from 2017 to whichever valuation date we pick? Why would that not be what guides the adjustments? Because nothing else is changing in this project. I mean, it's sort of from the summer of 2017, it seems it's a dead stop. We're not drilling anything else. There's no more discoveries being made. It's all that would be changing its value, it seems, is changes in the price of gold. So why don't we just look at that?
Thank you. Now, in valuation process, in determining the, say, cost base, if you use cost approach, or the value base, if you're using the market approach, you have to look at the characteristics of the asset. So this asset was not a mining project. If you go to the mining industry, as defined somewhere in my statement.
Let me make this shorter. It is whatever it was. We can call it whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
It is whatever it was in June of 2017.
Yes.
And by hypothesis, that had a value, and in this question, I'm assuming that value was reflected in the Shanta price. Whatever it was, it had that value. My question is, why wouldn't changes in that value over time be driven almost exclusively by changes in the price of gold?
Yeah, so because based on this was a gold deposit, there will be more factors other than gold price. Because if we were producing gold mine, maybe you could give more weight on the gold price because it's a producing gold mine. But this was a gold deposit with, say, 300,000 ounces plus in indicated category. So you'll have more factors to consider, and not only the gold price.
What factors?
Yes, so the size of the deposit, the location of the deposit, the owner, the profile of the seller, say, or the owner of the deposit. Say, if Helio had, say, at least one producing mine somewhere, and that one mine maybe to a gold mine, so all these will put different weights to, in addition to gold price.
How does that change the price of this asset?
Exactly. It could be either higher or lower depending on the outcome of that.
What makes it change? Why does any of that affect I mean, we've got, my hypothesis and my question, the amount of gold is fixed. Whatever they said was there, 3,000 or 300,000 indicated ounces, or whatever they said was there, that doesn't change. That's what's there. And we've got no further exploration being done.
Yeah.
So if nothing's changing concerning the nature of this asset, why does anything change its value over time, other than changes in the price of gold?
Exactly. In that environment, the location of the project.
That stays fixed. It doesn't change.
Yes, but there is a producing gold mine. For this case,
You mean the Shanta mine?
Yes, the Shanta.
Oh,
Yeah,
mhm.
Shanta was a
Right.
producing gold mine. Yeah. So, characteristic of in the market, plus Shanta's strategies, and also on the other side we had some other miners on the other side. So, based on the location of the project of this deposit, apart from market condition that you are referring to, it also you could have premiums or discounts based on the specific characteristics in that particular location.
Okay, thank you very much.
No follow-up questions on the party's side, not from the claimant, not from the respondent. So that completes your examination, Mr. Mangakala. Thank you very much for your assistance.
Thank you.
And this leads us to the lunch break. Should we resume at 2 o'clock? Is that fine? And then we'll listen to the claimants first on our questions of yesterday and any additional points you wish to make in a maximum of 1 hour. And then we would have a break and listen to you, and at the end might have we may have a procedural discussion. If there are issues that the tribunal has about valuation, we must first discuss this. And so I think it would probably be more reasonable that we put them to you at the end of the day, and you deal with them in writing, because if we tell you at 2 o'clock and we need the answer 5 minutes thereafter, it may be a little improvised. Is that?
I mean, I'm very happy to be cross-examined by you or any other tribunal member, President, on quantum and valuation.
Well, see, I'm not excluding that we may have questions on the spot as well, right? So if after discussing it during lunch we have questions that we will want to raise immediately, we may want to do it. It doesn't mean that you cannot deal with them also in writing as well thereafter. Is that fine with the respondents as well?
Yes, Madam President.
Good. Then if there's nothing further to be addressed now, we could have the lunch break and be back at 2 o'clock.